So this is a video that I've kind of been wanting to make for a while now, but I never felt like it was I was in like a good position within, my academic career, if you will, to talk about it. But now that, I'm pretty much at the end of it, I feel like this is kind of the best time to do so. Today we're going to be spending a little bit of time talking about a couple of things that I wish I knew prior to coming to Purdue University. So for a little bit of context as to who I am, I'm a graduating senior. I've spent the last 4 years here studying mechanical engineering. And so, I think I have a little bit of perspective as to how I expected things to be coming in 4 years ago and how things really were and shaped out to be over the course of my experience. At the same time, I'm also just a moron who has one too many opinions sometimes, so take it as you will. So one of the first things that I wish I knew 4 years ago when I was barely 18 years old and I just got accepted here, people paint this picture that Purdue is an Ivy League school, but without having an Ivy League price tag. And now, for context, if you don't know what tuition is here, it's roughly $10,000 a year if you're in state, around 25 out of state. Now I'm in state, so for me, it's a pretty good deal. For comparison, most Ivy League schools like Harvard, MIT, generally they kind of tend to hover around, being around $50,000 a year to attend, just for tuition. So obviously, that's pretty tempting to, a little high schooler. You can pay a fifth of the price and get the same education. It sounds like a pretty good deal to me. So the thing is, that kind of leads into my next point where everybody kind of gives you this impression or they try to give you this impression, and it's not even like alumni either. It's kind of just everybody that the level of quality of the education is supposed to be top notch, on par with something like MIT or Harvard or whatever, right? Insert generic Ivy League school. And the thing is, I know, I'm probably a little bit biased just because of the fact that I have spent, the last 4 years of my life here and a good chunk of money just to go here, really. But, it is a good school. I can't say that I regret it. At the same time, I can confidently say that it's not all that it's cracked up to be. It kind of suffers from a lot of the standard university issues, right? Where you have professors that care more about their research than they do teaching other people, because obviously that's what makes them money. So why would you really care about something that is a fraction of your income when most of it comes from stuff that doesn't involve teaching other people, basically? That's obviously a pretty glaring issue, and as a result the quality of education that you receive does suffer. And while most schools suffer from this, I think that I think that Purdue stands in a bit of a special place because people make it out to be something that it's not. It's like going to that restaurant that your friends always tell you about, right? They make it out to be this super exquisite fine dining place, and then you get there and it's literally just Applebee's. It's really not different than anywhere else. And I think as a result of that, you come in with this glorious image painted of the place, and then it just doesn't live up to the hype. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. Another point of contention that I have is that everybody plays off the engineering program and makes it seem like it's way better than it actually is. So I'm a mechanical engineering student, and the same people that were, kind of hyping up the school in itself were also hyping up the engineering program and saying that, it's super difficult, but you're going to learn so much and you're going to get a job instantly out of college. And like, you're going to be like that, 10 out of 10 model basically to companies, and companies, they're going to be like on their knees begging for you to work for them. Obviously, in hindsight, it's not true. The thing is, imagine being freshly 18 years old, right? Or whatever, right? Like, you just recently learned how to drive, still pretty much going through puberty, and the most you've done is like work a part-time job, right? And like now all of a sudden you have all these people saying like, oh, if you just go to this school, you're gonna get like pretty much a 6-figure salary. Also, they're showing you petroleum engineering salaries, but we all know how stable that industry is. So like, they're hyping up this whole thing, and they're like, you spend 4 years here, you're gonna make 6 figures, you're gonna love life. It's like basically the non-tech version of working at like Facebook, right? Or like Google, and that's what a lot of people try to paint this image of. So like, you're barely, you're still in high school basically, and you're like, oh dude, yeah, like that sounds good to me. But the thing is, like, once again, it's just not really true. You still gotta scrap for work just like everybody else, and just like everybody else, there's always somebody who's more qualified than you, and that's just kind of how it is. I think a lot of people have the false impression that something like merit is kind of more important when you've gone to a quote-unquote really good school like this. But at the end of the day, like, it doesn't matter where you go, it's all about just networking. Like, whoever that's what's most important, because you might have more skills, like you might be more qualified skill-wise than the next guy, but he'll still probably get the job just because he knows somebody. That's just how it is. It's how it always has been, and that's probably how it always will be. Either way, back to the engineering program, before I go off on a tangent, you learn a pretty good amount from it. I would say that it's a good program, right? Like, don't get me wrong here. You learn a good amount from it, but like, the big issue that I have with it is just the fact that it's so much work. And when I say so much work, I don't mean like, oh, it's hard, or, the work that we do have, or like, these projects take forever to complete, like all that stuff. I don't mean that, because I think that, working on projects is something that is actually beneficial to like the learning experience, right? And I think that making the content difficult is also really beneficial. And I think that, the projects that we do have are difficult. Content can be difficult at times, and that's a good thing. My big problem though comes with the fact that there's so much busy work. In high school, when you have like 30 math problems that you got to do for your algebra class, like that is pretty much the same thing, just like scaled to the scope of like an engineering problem. So like, instead of having 30 problems, you have like 6 problems, but they're all really long. 6 problems sometimes doesn't sound like a lot, but it's to the point where you're spending like an entire day's worth of work on it, right? Like, personally, I have a problem with that, because I think that it results in a lot of people, and myself included, just trying to get things done, not actually learning it, right? Because actually learning it would take longer. And when you're already having to spend, close to 8 to 10 hours a day, every single day, 7 days a week, working on this stuff, like, after a certain point, you just kind of want to get it done, right? Like, it doesn't incentivize genuinely learning material. What's the difference between having 5 problems and having 2, right? It's the same content, it's just worded differently and it has different numbers. I don't know. Personally, for me, it's just, maybe some people benefit from that, but I really struggle to see how that's a good system personally. So I'm of the belief that you could accomplish that same amount of learning, if not even more, solely by just cutting down on like 30 to 40% of the workload reduce that 6-problem homework assignment down to 3. 3 would be more than doable in a day, and like you actually spending a genuine amount of time learning the material rather than just figuring out what you have to do to get it done. And so I think that, a system like that would actually incentivize proper learning of the material, which at the end of the day, isn't that kind of something that you want for like an engineer or just anybody in general, right? Like if these people are going to be responsible in part, whether directly or indirectly, for potentially the lives of other people, like you would want them to genuinely know their stuff rather than just trying to get through a test. And so that's kind of where I have a big problem with a lot of programs that are structured like the programs that we kind of have here. It's arbitrarily difficult, if that makes sense. Kind of piggybacking off of that, the emphasis on the workload is really extreme. It's not like, it's one thing if you have homework assignments where it's like, oh, well, you only have to do 3 of them, but we have attached 3 optional ones, just in case, if you got time or if you feel like it, fine, right? That's totally acceptable. In fact, I would rather have that. It's probably the best way to do it. But the fact is that these problems are so long and they're so heavily weighted, right? Like you pretty much have to do them because exams are structured in a way that they're difficult, which is fair. But like in order to give yourself the most padding for your grade, you have to do all these problems and you have to do them well, which means you have to spend the time on them. And this is all kind of building up to like a final point that I have. But because of this, it takes up so much time every single day just working on stuff that when you suddenly do have exams, you don't have time to study for them. And like these exams are difficult and like there's no getting around that. There's an age-old saying where it's like, study for X amount of hours a day and then you never have to like cram for an exam in your life, which is fine, and I believe in that. The problem is when you don't have the hours in the day, you're kind of screwed. Like it forces you to cram at some point. I know there's going to be people who always will make the argument of like, oh, well, if you have good time management. The problem is like you have 24 hours in a day, right? Ideally, in order to be the best performing version of yourself, you want to sleep around like 6 to 8 hours in a day. I think that's pretty undisputed. So now you're down to like 16, 18 hours of being awake. Okay. So now imagine this, right? You're spending 8 hours a day, roughly 7 days a week on homework. Maybe another 2 hours eating, and then maybe another hour just like getting ready each day or like whatever. See the problem? Even just the time spent eating and getting ready for the day, like showering and just being clean in general, you have 12 hours roughly, anywhere from 12 to 14 hours to actually do anything in the day. So when homework itself takes close to 8 hours every single day to do, you're down to 4 hours roughly that you can study. The problem is, find me one person who is able to use those remaining 4 hours and efficiently study and not suffer mentally from it. Like, I don't buy it. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm a little baby, but like, I don't buy it, dude. It is absurd. So when I was a kid, I remember my older brother, who was in college at the time, and I was in like middle school. I don't remember what I said specifically, but I remember him telling me about like a triangle where you have academics, you have sleep, and then you have social life, and you can only pick 2. I remember not believing him. The thing is that it's kind of true. If you think back to the hours in a day that you have, you can really only spend, if you want to excel in either of those like 3 categories, or do those 3 categories like, sufficiently to where you should be, whatever, right? You can only pick 2. And I think that that's not right personally. It's mentally straining, right? Because you can sleep enough and you can do well enough in school, but now you have no friends, so you have nobody to talk to when things get sour or something takes a negative turn, and now all of a sudden you're having a really bad time. You don't have anybody to talk to, and that causes a lot of problems. The same thing where if you focus on sleep and social life, right? What are you even going to school for, right? Like it's a balancing act that I think that shouldn't have to happen. And I think that Purdue doesn't do a good job of trying to allow people to have all three. And I think there's a lot of schools that are better about it personally. And so that's one of the big points of contention that I have with the school itself.